Welcome. I'm Eric Fleming, host of A Moment with Eric Fleming, the podcast of our time. I want to personally thank you for listening to the podcast. If you like what you're hearing, then I need you to do a few things. First, I need subscribers. I'm on Patreon at patreon.com/A Moment with Eric Fleming. Your subscription allows an independent podcaster like me the freedom to speak truth to power and to expand and improve the show. Second, leave a 5-star review for the podcast on the streaming service you listen to it. That will help the podcast tremendously. Third, go to the website, momenteric.com. There you can subscribe to the podcast, leave reviews and comments, listen to past episodes, and even learn a little bit about your host. Lastly, don't keep this a secret like it's your own personal guilty pleasure. Tell someone else about the podcast. Encourage others to listen to the podcast and share the podcast on your social media platforms because it is time to make this moment a movement. Thanks in advance for supporting the podcast of our time. I hope you enjoyed this episode as well.
The following program is hosted by the NVG Podcast Network.
Hello, and welcome to another Moment with Eric Fleming. I am your host, Eric Fleming, and this was supposed to be a vacation week for me. It's still a vacation from my regular job, but I was going to take a break from the podcast too. I was going to, just, I don't know, maybe do a greatest hits kind of thing or whatever. I don't know, just took the week off. I don't know. But fortunately, a guest that I had scheduled to come on earlier this year and couldn't make it was able to reschedule for around this time. So I was very, very honored to have her to come on, and she's going to talk about her book and the research that led to this book and the subject matter that is really, really timely, especially since it's dealing with our prison system in the United States. So I was really, really glad that she was able to make that time to do that. And somebody I really had been anticipating on interviewing for a while. And so I hope that you appreciate the conversation that we were able to have and you get something out of it. And at the end of the day, get the book, right? So we're kicking off season number 12 with this episode. And I guess that was kind of the way it was timed. That's why I was going to take a break in between the end of season 11 and this. But this is a great way to kick off season 12. I think this conversation, and she's going to be my only guest on this episode. But yeah, so we're into season 12 now, and we're going to keep going and keep doing this. I'm still on the lookout for 20,000 subscribers on patreon.com/A Moment with Eric Fleming. So, whatever support you can give is great. The subscription is only $1 a month. But, if you go to momenteric.com and do a review or give me 5 stars or whatever you want to do to show support and show that, people are out here listening, I would greatly appreciate that because I want to continue to have quality guests like the guest I'm having today and all the other folks that I've had on. And the lineup is, in my opinion, awesome that's coming up. There's going to be some people that you have heard of on national and you may have seen them on CNN or MSNBC or whatever. And then there's other folks that you don't know, but they're pretty awesome people and they're doing some incredible work. And so I greatly appreciate them agreeing to come on, and I hope that you will appreciate the conversations we have once they're presented to you. So go ahead and go to patreon.com/a moment with Eric Fleming, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell everyone. Because like I say in the opening monologue, we're trying to make this moment a movement, right? All right. So as always, we want to kick it off with my friend Grace G doing the news. So let's kick it off with a moment of news with Grace G.
Thanks, Eric. Former Louisville police officer Brett Hankison was sentenced to 33 months in federal prison for violating Breonna Taylor's rights. Bernice King, daughter of Martin Luther King Jr., criticized the Trump administration for releasing her father's assassination files. Civil rights advocates condemned the Jacksonville, Florida Sheriff's Department after a viral video showed officers punching and throwing a black man to the ground during a traffic stop. The Pentagon announced it is ending the deployment of 700 active duty Marines to Los Angeles. President Trump has sued the Wall Street Journal and its owners for $10 billion, alleging defamation over a report linking him to a 2003 birthday greeting for Jeffrey Epstein. New Jersey federal court judges refused to extend the appointment of Alina Habba as the state's top federal prosecutor. The Department of Justice is reportedly gathering information on voter rolls in several states ahead of the 2026 midterm elections. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated that the U.S. can now deport lawful permanent residents who have supported Haitian gang leaders. Idaho has agreed not to prosecute or revoke the licenses of doctors who refer patients out of state for abortions. The Trump administration will release over $1 billion for after-school and summer educational programs, reversing an earlier freeze on K-12 school funding. The Democratic Republic of Congo and the M23 rebel group have committed to signing a peace agreement by August 18th. A car crashed into a crowd outside a Los Angeles nightclub, injuring at least 30 people, after which the driver was assaulted by onlookers and shot. Actor Malcolm Jamal Warner, known for The Cosby Show, died at the age of 54. And William Bill Clay Sr., Missouri's first black U.S. congressman, died at the age of 94. I am Grace G., and this has been A Moment of News.
All right. Thank you, Grace, for that moment of news. Now it's time for my guest, Dr. Brittany Friedman. Dr. Brittany Friedman is recognized as an innovative thinker on how people and institutions hide harmful truths. Her current work examines this in the realm of social control and the underside of government, such as prisons, courts, and treasuries. Dr. Friedman is considered a path-breaking scholar producing big ideas that blow the whistle on bad behavior within society, and author of a winter 2025 book titled Carceral Apartheid: How Lies and White Supremacists Run Our Prisons. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor and privilege to have as a guest on this podcast, Dr. Brittany Friedman. All right, Dr. Brittany Friedman. How you doing, ma'am? You doing good?
Yes. Hi, Eric. I'm doing good. Thank you.
Well, I am glad to see you, and I'm glad we were able to work this out where I could get you on and talk about this, this book that you wrote, but more or less kind of the issue that you were addressing in the book, because it seems like you have spent your whole life dealing with this particular issue. So I want to kind of get into that a little bit. But to start it off, I usually do a couple of icebreakers. So the first icebreaker is a quote. And the quote is, "Racism will disappear when it's no longer profitable and no longer psychologically useful." What does that quote mean to you?
So I love that you start with this quote because it's a quote that I quote one of the sections of my book. I use that quote. And the reason being is because race does truly function as a weapon. And for me, how that occurs is, when you want to conquer a people or a population, you have to think of what are the best ways to do this. Well, we know historically division is one of the most powerful tools, but you can't divide a people unless you are able to convince people that one population is undeserving of their existence. And one of the most successful ways you can do that is by creating labels. And these labels can vary from what a racial group is to someone being perceived as a criminal to, someone being perceived as hysterical, right? Insane, a behavioral problem. And it is this application of labels that then allows institutions, even individual people to enact just extreme levels of violence under the guise of fixing people or fixing society. And so I love that quote because it's just clear and to the point, right? When you hear it, you're immediately like, exactly, right? That is how race functions. It is why race was such a crucial part of European colonization is having these categories. So then we can create a hierarchy and justify the true evil that, they were doing.
Yeah. All right. So the next icebreaker is what I call 20 questions. So I need you to give me a number between 1 and 20.
It's going to be 7.
Okay. What do you consider the best way to stay informed about politics, current events, health, etc.?
One of the best things we can do is 2 things. First, stay locked in and tuned in to people like yourself, right? People like yourself that are using their gifts to speak truth to power, that are using their sight and their vision to showcase with potent clarity what's happening in the world and in our communities. And then second, never stop reading. I always tell people, read everything. Don't just, define yourself by a genre and be like, oh, I just read, this. It's like, no, read everything. And, some of the people I look up to in terms of thinkers, like that's what they did. They literally read every genre. They're reading fiction, nonfiction, poetry, staying locked into art, because by doing that, if you're in your full humanity of what you're consuming, then you can actually see the full humanity of the world. You don't siphon your mind off into different categories. And so I would say those 2 things for me allow us to stay in our authenticity. And that's the key to being free, to freeing yourself.
Okay. All right. So what was the inspiration you pulled from your grandmother?
My grandmother, she was a fighter. She was a sharecropper before my mom was born. My mom is the youngest of 12. So, my grandmother, she was married off at a very young age. She was like 13. She had a lot of trials that she had to overcome, being married young. She had a lot of children, which is the norm at the time. She was working as a sharecropper in the Boot Hill, which is where I have a lot of family, of Missouri. It's right next to Arkansas. And every time I say Boot Hill, I feel like my accent comes back. It disappears, but when I talk about the Boot Hill, it's like it just comes all the way back. And she was evicted, and I talk about this in the prologue of my book because that image of her that I show, the image my family found in the Library of Congress of her being a part of this protest when she was evicted, and she's holding my Aunt Nora, who's my mom's much older sister. And she's just standing there. She's in the protest, all of their belongings, everything to their name on the side of the road. And when I first saw it, it made me cry. Because I know that, my grandmother, she was forced to work so hard her whole life in the legacy of our ancestors that have been forced for generations, right? To have your body be used as a tool, not having ownership of your body or agency over your body. And as a Black woman, seeing my grandmother in that way and the multifaceted ways that she didn't have control over her body and her labor, it just brought me to tears. And then to see her holding my aunt, an aunt that's now passed away, but like, I love my aunt Nora, and seeing her little baby her like in my grandmother's arms, it just made me cry, because I know that now, anytime I feel like, oh, I can't do it, or I feel just too beaten down, I think about my grandma, how strong she was. And then also like she had a softness that was a part of her rebellion too, is that she refused to let the world harden her. And she had a softness to her as well. And she, really, for me, is the reason why I love to cook, is because she taught my mom to cook. So that's something that I inherited from them, is just like as a way of loving yourself and reclaiming your body. And she had a garden. I'm an herbalist. And so when I'm with plants and I teach my daughters about plants, I also think of my grandmother and all these ways that she existed. And so for me, she represents what it truly means to rebel in all these ways while maintaining your true self. And she's always with me now. She's an ancestor now, but she's always around. It's like when you ask that question, it's not a coincidence. I looked at the clock because I'm on Pacific time and it said 11:11. I'm like, okay, grandma. Yep. It was right at 11:11. You asked it. So she's always here. So that is what I take from my grandmother. And I'm very grateful for her. And I wish I could have told her more of this when she was alive, but I know that she hears me now.
Yeah. All right. So the book that you alluded to is called Carceral Apartheid: How Lies and White Supremacists Run Our Prisons. So my question to you is, how did you come up with the term carceral apartheid? And two, how long have you been researching this issue?
So I came up with the term carceral apartheid because I was just so immersed in what I was discovering. I had collected all of these interviews with former Black political prisoners in California that, had survived. What I lay out in my book was essentially a version of COINTELPRO in prison, but pre-COINTELPRO. Like, I'm showing even farther back, there was this eugenicist agenda to destroy Black people in the state of California that is also being exported out to other states. And being with those transcripts, and also being with people and their families, and then matching that to the archives that I just spent years in, I'm like, okay, so if I'm staying true to how people are describing their experience, this is apartheid. Like, people are, and that's how people, maybe not using that word, but directly would say, like, during my incarceration, when I was disappeared in a solitary cell, I thought of how Nelson Mandela was incarcerated at the same time as me for being a freedom fighter like me, right? And so as I am thinking this through, I'm like, this is a broader system where prisons are still a tool of settler colonialism or conquering a people and containing people and removing them. And that is what apartheid is. And it's only possible through these carceral institutions, meaning through control, through jails, through prisons, through boarding schools, which is a worldwide phenomenon, right? All indigenous populations, whether in Africa, US, Canada, Australia, being snatched away as children from their homes and their families. And so I saw that connection once I, really had the full picture. And I'm a very visual person. So I had everything laid out so I could see it and like drawing connections. And I'm like, this is global. And I'm looking at a case of this. So what is it? What is it? This is apartheid, but it's carceral apartheid because the carceral states of these nations are what is doing the actual violent labor Like that's what's actually maintaining apartheid and creating this system. And I wanted to center that to be true to what people articulated to me that they survived and how they survived it.
Yeah. So how long have you been doing it?
I mean, oh my goodness, I started this work in 2013. And so for a long time, because you finish a book so much sooner than when it comes out. So I like back in 2023, excuse me, when I was writing, I was at the end, I'm like, okay, it's been a decade. Now I'm like, that's not even true. It's like, it is 2025. We are well into 2025. So that is almost 12 years because I'm still going through everything that I collected and have because I couldn't put it in the book. And now I'm trying to figure out what to do with it all because it's just so much, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So why did you start the book with a couple of timelines?
I started the book that way, going back to what I was saying earlier, because I wanted people to see these connections. And I'm a very visual person, and I felt like, I could say it, but if people can see the timeline of what's happening concurrently in the United States at the same time as what's happening in the African continent, what's happening in Europe, what's happening in Palestine and Israel. Like if people can see this visually, then it makes more of an impact. I find even with teaching, people remember the argument when they can see it too, not just hear it.
Yeah, it was very compelling. It was like when I started looking, I was like, oh wow, she's really like connecting dots with this thing with the timeline. It was like the first timeline in American. I was like, okay, cool. It is. Oh, that was the world timeline too. Oh wow, okay. Yeah. So I just wanted to kind of get you to articulate what was your thought process in doing that. Cause like you said, as a visual person, that really kind of tells a story. Many classic books start with a profound opening sentence. Your opening sentence is, most major institutions in our lives are built on lies. And for this, we are all haunted. Why was that your opening statement? And what tone did you want that sentence to set for the book?
I wanted to bring people into the shadows of all of the things that we take for granted. Because for one, we do take, and I say we as a collective, not us individually, but we as a human collective still often take prisons for granted as just a legitimate institution. But I wanted to really zone in on the fact that that's not the only institution we take for granted. We take for granted how our families are supposed to look without digging deeper to the fact that, like, is this the way that our ancestors organized our families? Or is this the product of centuries of colonialism that now our families are organized this way? The same thing with institutions like marriage, which is related. Is this the actual template? Or is this a template that dates back to the inheritance of property and needing to have the quote unquote legitimate firstborn, right? All of these things that debunk this whole myth of like, you find the one you love, you get married, it's a fairy tale. That's actually not the history of marriage. That is not it. The same thing in terms of religion, right? Like, is this actually promoting a true connection to whatever we hold dear as, all of the different names we could use? Or is this an organized system that is hierarchical, that allows for the concentration of power, often gendered, at the top, where everyone else is being told how they can be saved versus like, is that actually the original intention? If we go back to, I'll just use an example, the cult of Christianity. Like, was that the intention, or has this particular religion been shaped by centuries of nation state building? And that's why, so that's how I think about things. I am now at a place where I try not to take things for granted when I see them, just to see them at face value. And that's why I chose that sentence, because really diving into my book requires you to do that. You have to discard everything you might have heard about certain people that are in the book, certain institutions and their intentions in order for you to actually be open enough to, I would say, have a fair opinion on its contents.
Yeah. All right. I'm gonna jump to chapter 5 and ask you to talk about the significance of the Soledad brothers and the Black guerrilla family in challenging this carceral apartheid system.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that moment in history, right, where you have this shooting that happens in Soledad of 3 Black militant leaders, and leaders in term, leaders meaning held a level of esteem within the population of incarcerated Black people that are organizing for freedom on the inside at the same time, right? We're talking late 60s, 1969, right? 1970. We're talking at the same time as we're seeing, all of the ongoing still marches, the really heyday of Black power. And I wanted to show and articulate that even though we have this juggernaut of a system that's coming with all this historical weight, right? At the same time, you have ingenuity, you have an organized response that's brewing. And with this, the murder in particular of W.L. Nolan, who I highlight because he was just, it really came out in the interviews that I did and also in the archives, like what he meant to the movement. And one of the key points I think that sometimes isn't fully articulated is that, his level of strategy to organize people across race was so key. It's what made him so threatening and why it was believed that he was targeted that day in Soledad to be shot and to be set up in this fight with white supremacists on the yard, right? And just before that, he had organized a petition and he got incarcerated people of all racial groups to sign it, saying, look, these are all the basically the human rights violations that have happened within the California Department of Corrections. This is the logic of that system. And he laid it out. And, I argue that it wholly lays even more proof to, my claim that this is a carceral apartheid system, because he lays it out. He's like, this is by division. They are using like categories. They're segregating us, kind of trying to hold people in torturous conditions to break their mind. And then he's killed for it. He's murdered for it. And the co-founders of the Black guerrilla family that I spent years with, really articulated that moment taught them that they have to live free or die trying, which is why I use that as a header in a section of the book, because that it was coming from the interviews. Like we saw that, like, when you are able to unite people around the shared clarity that we are a prisoner class and that this is a prison state, it's a prison nation and a prison world, you will be executed for it. And I found, in the archives, direct quotes from prison officials that would say, and I quote it in the book, they would say, we don't want to create martyrs. And it's because they were trying to hide what was going on intentionally, because they didn't want someone like W.L. Nolan to be a martyr, because they knew that it would unite people. And that's what it did. It really shifted where incarcerated Black people that were self-described as Black militants were like, we can no longer be separate. Yes, we can have our affiliations. You could be a Nation of Islam. I could be a Panther, for example. But while we're here within the Department of Corrections, we are the Black guerrilla family. Like, we're united right now. And we have to be. Otherwise, they will just keep picking us off in that way. And so that's what I took from that moment. And I did my very best to show it and not just articulate it. I wanted people to feel like they were there when they're reading it, and you can envision the feeling, the feeling of what would it take to push a human being to that point where they're like, I have to organize myself or I will be murdered.
Yeah. Well, you definitely do a good job in that. As somebody that loves history, it was just, how visceral it was to read that and feel like you were there, like you were witnessing that, and you were in the meetings and you understood why the people were, I guess, rebelling, for lack of a better term, but just trying to figure out how they're going to manage to survive in that instance. So you did a great job in doing that. Explain the Asker versus Governor of California lawsuit, which was settled in 2015, and its impact.
Mm-hmm. So, this lawsuit, it's coming decades later. And what makes it so powerful is that it really showcases everything that the Black guerrilla family wanted to happen. They wanted this uniting of incarcerated people under one banner to say, we understand what the Department of Corrections is doing and the colonial logics that they're using, and we refuse. Basically, we just refuse. And that's what happened. So starting in the 2010s, you have a series of hunger strikes, and they come about because coming out of Pelican Bay, you have the leaders of all of the major prisoner organizations all sitting in isolation, all in solitary. The attorneys for that set of men did a brilliant job, in my opinion, of really publicizing their clients through their own voice and creating an entire, online archive, which you can find, which I encourage people to do and watch these videos so you can hear people articulate their own reasonings in their own voice, but articulating that, there was a moment of just enlightenment, particularly for groups that had been antagonizing, especially antagonizing to the Black guerrilla family for years, that despite all of that, we all ended up here. Like, we're all here. We've all been pawns of this system. And so they gave an order that we will no longer fight each other because we know that they're using us against each other. They published a statement that I encourage people to also look up after listening to these video interviews, which are just so powerful. The Agreement to End Hostilities is the title they gave it, which tells you everything, and sign their names. Sign their names so you can see, like, we are the authority. And we're saying, to everyone, lay down your arms. This is not our war. This is a war that was manufactured for us. For what I argue in my book is it's as the ultimate means of control and exploitation. It's like playing puppet master. And so that lawsuit it's coming out of that movement, that big movement of the Agreement to End Hostilities. And Asker is Todd Asker, who had been identified actually as a leader in the Aryan Brotherhood. So his name is listed, but if you look, it's his name and the other names as well. And that lawsuit was one of the main goals. There's many, but one of the main goals was to end indeterminate solitary in the SHU. And I think that what kind of eventually became of the lawsuit really shows you how even when the Department of Corrections is forced to settle, right, and is forced to make concessions, they don't actually implement what they're ordered to do. So they were actually ordered, right, to develop a system of allowing people to come out of the SHU and to stop the racial segregation. And here we are still now in California, and many people argue that the conditions are worse. And even legal pushes against to say they're not doing what they're not actually implementing any court orders, have been shot down. And so I think that we can take this as a case study of then where do we go now? When you have this incredible movement from the inside led by incarcerated people uniting, and then it goes through the courts and it culminates in this suit. And the Department of Corrections is just like, nah, we're not going to do it. Like, and then so then there's no sanctions. on the Department of Corrections, right? And so that is unfortunately where we are right now in California.
Yeah. So normally I don't do appendixes for my podcast, but so when you've heard the terms, for the listeners, when you heard the terms Soledad and Pelican Bay, those are prisons in California. And the SHU that Dr. Friedman is referring to is the security housing units that are in Pelican Bay. So when you heard Denzel in the movie Training Day, you know, you'd be playing basketball in Pelican Bay. That's what he was talking about for the
Yep.
listener. All right. So let's close this out. And I apologize. Well, I got a couple more questions, but I apologize because this book is really, really detailed, and a half hour is not really going to get into the meat, but I wanted to highlight some things. And so you were talking about no sanctions, or, you know, for folks not doing what the lawsuit or the settlement of the lawsuit requires. So at the end of your book, you wrote, "Our invitation to awaken demands an end to the heteropatriarchy, criminalization, racism, and surveillance that creates the conditions upon which carceral apartheid thrives domestically and globally. We will no longer be introduced to a fate bought and paid for with lies, white supremacy, and ultimately social control. Instead, we rewrite the past, create a new present, and envision a future where true joy is based in radical love and compassion, not profit and chasing fleeting heights." So my question to you is, policy-wise, how do we accept that invitation?
So there's a number of policies in the works or that have been tested and started in different states. And there's also global examples that I can point to. But to kind of narrow it down, and in the interest of time, I think I will focus on just a couple. So first and foremost, I think one of the main things that we can do literally immediately is abolish all fines, fees, and debt related to prisons and the criminal justice system. It's another area of my work is looking at social control through financial fees and burdens that are layered onto incarcerated people and their families. But what I have found in that work is that, and also in looking at some test cases where some jurisdictions have provided debt amnesty, for example, like they'll just say, okay, all your court fines, fees from that criminal case, they're gone. And shown the significant impact that has on our community, specifically communities of color, right? And the freedom, the freedom in the sense of not having that debt and not having the risk of that debt ruining also your credit, all the financial consequences. I would just say immediately, like, if there's something that we can all get behind, irregardless of our politics, like tomorrow, would be abolishing that debt. It would be abolishing the ability to financially profit from someone's incarceration in a cage. And those are two-part, right? They're not the same thing, but they're highly correlated. And what I mean by the second one is the allowance for bidding on private contracts, not just with private prisons, because the majority of our prisons in the United States are actually public. And so yes, private prisons are a problem, but we also should be very concerned about the fact that our public prisons have all of these private bidding and contracts that allow for this capitalist exploitation of incarcerated people. And those are the two things immediately. Another, I know I said two and I keep going, but there has been, significant policy pushes that happen, especially during the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, that shows that we can reduce our prison population significantly should we choose to. And I can just give this case of when I was living in New Jersey. I was in New Jersey in 2020, right when, the tri-state, we were all shut, like on lockdown pretty early in the pandemic, right? And New Jersey was one of the states that had significant numbers in terms of rates of COVID spreading amongst incarcerated people, and then deaths. Some very notable deaths, in particularly, I'm thinking of Tiffany Mofield's death in solitary with COVID in the women's prison in New Jersey. It was horrific. And so we see the governor at the time, Murphy, he does start passing this really innovative legislation, at least for the time, releasing people, allowing a significant mass release. And it's like, that tells me as an abolitionist, like, we can do it. Like, if you actually want to think of ways to significantly reduce our current prison population, we can. And it shouldn't take, people dying in a horrific way through a pandemic for us to say, oh, we could do that now. That tells me that these are human beings that could have been free sooner. They could have been free much sooner than this moment if we're just going to do the mass release, right? And it kind of just disrupts our whole notion of like, then why were they still there in the first place? What are the incentives that kept them there before, it was a political fallout? And so then you have to release them because it's a pandemic. So those are the questions I want people to think through. It's like, what are the incentives? How can the policies I'm talking about are disrupting the incentives of incarceration, of mass incarceration, the financial incentives, the political incentives. And I tried to highlight, some examples that have successfully done that in recent years. And it's something, especially on the financial end, my research lab, the Captive Money Lab, we're doing a lot of work around prison pay to stay and disrupting and repealing the financial incentive to actually charge people daily rate fees, which is what we're studying. So I have tried to lay out a few things. There's so many more, but I know I can't get into them all.
Yeah, well, that's understood. So what do you want? I usually ask most authors when they come on this question, what do you want the reader of this book to take away from it?
I want people to feel empowered. The reason why I ended the book with the invitation to awaken is because I wanted people to reclaim their power. Because this world, it is a prison planet in the sense that the world tries to convince people from an early age through our social institutions, through school, family, the way that religion is done, through personal relationships, through, right, the carceral state, that we're helpless little beings that can't think for ourselves. And it's just not true. Human beings we're miraculous beings. We have ingenuity. We have the ability to be resilient, yes, but we're exceptionally creative. And we're also not supposed to be disconnected from the natural world. That's something I learned in my own family's heritage through my grandmother, right? That's something I prioritize now, is teaching my children how to have a loving relationship with the earth versus a relationship that is based on forced labor and exploitation. And so that is what I want people to now, especially, people of color, is really like grounding into our sense of power and sovereignty and what that means individually, but also collectively. Because for me, I can also just highlight like one of the most healing kind of reclaiming my power processes that I went through personally was spending the last year from 2024 through early 2025 in an herbalist apprenticeship surrounded by the majority of women and non-binary people of color and many Black herbalists. And it was just a very healing experience because we spent a lot of time talking and also practicing with our actions, like abolition in that space. And what does that mean for the everyday? And I loved it because it took me out of the academy in a way that was very beautiful. And so that's just, I'm still processing that, but I want more spaces for us like that. And I miss that space, to be honest, all the time. I'm like, oh, I wish we had our weekly meeting still. Yeah. So that's what I encourage people to do is how can you free yourself, right? What does that mean to you? What are things in your life that you have to let go? What are people, relationships? That's what I really believe. It's like abolition. It starts as an internal process.
Yeah. All right. So Dr. Brittany Friedman, first of all, thank you for coming on. How can people get Carceral Apartheid, how lies and white supremacists run our prisons, and how can people reach out to you to either talk about the book or just pick your brain about other stuff?
You can get your copy of Carceral Apartheid pretty much anywhere online and at your local bookstore. And I have found if your local bookstore, if it doesn't have a copy of my book, if you tell them, they will get copies in. We have to support independent booksellers. Some of my favorite that have an online presence where you can order my book online and support Black-owned independent bookstores are Harriet's Bookshop. They have an online store. Marcus Books, the oldest Black-owned bookstore in the country, has my book in store and online. And Reparations Club here in LA, they have an online store and they have it in store. So I highly encourage you to support, your independent booksellers. And then if you want to chat with me or find me, my handle is the same everywhere. So luckily, it is at Curly Professor. My favorite place, I like Blue Sky right now, but I am on Instagram and I am on X. I'm on X still, but you can find me on the other places. And my website is brittanyfriedman.com.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Friedman, don't feel guilty about X. I'm still on it too, but
Thank you, Eric.
I do it primarily for the podcast, but yeah, I'm still on there. So, but again, just thank you for coming on. I really, really appreciated being able to read this book, and it got me going into some of the other stuff that had happened, like with George Jackson and then the Attica prison. Cause, I was like a baby, basically. I was like, preschool when all this stuff was going on. But I remember images, right? And being a student of history, it's like, in the culture, Attica's always there. And of course, Pelican Bay and San Quentin and Soledad. So you kind of bring a lot of that home. And I'm glad you really kind of got me energized into looking into it a little more. So I appreciate that. And again, thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Eric. That means so much to me. I appreciate it.
All right, guys, and we'll catch y'all on the other side. All right, and we are back. So I want to thank Dr. Brittany Friedman for coming on. As stated, my plan was to take a break and be on vacation, but I've been wanting to get this sister on for a while, and we worked it out where she could come in and do the interview, and I hope that you got something from it. As I said during the interview, we really only scratched the surface. I suggest that you get this book, Carceral Apartheid, and read it for yourself. And hopefully there'll be a follow-up to that. We just kind of talked about some of the research that she wasn't able to put in the book. All right. But I really thank her for coming on. And again, like I said, I hope y'all appreciate it. And I'm a little frustrated, not with her, but the subject matter she talked about in dealing with white supremacy and lies is not just confined to our penal institutions. And it's really not just confined to white folks, right? Because any system of oppression to be successful has to have buy-in by some of those that are oppressed. And there always has to be a face behind it. So, I have this bad habit of paying attention to social media. Now, the main reason is because of the podcast. I try to market it and put it out there. And so I have to have my presence on all of these platforms. And a lot of these platforms I really don't like. But, it's open. So anybody that's got an opinion, just like the podcast gives me an opportunity to have opinion, social media gives these people an opportunity to have an opinion, and it is what it is. So, I was really watching. It was something, I don't know how old this was, but it was a black congressman who's a Republican. I believe he's from Texas. I don't know. I can't remember. But he was making the argument that Kamala Harris was a DEI person. He was those talking points that white supremacists use. This black man was using it. And he was talking about the fact, well, she doesn't have my qualifications. I went to West Point and, I got represented a district that's, majority white, and they voted for Donald Trump with 20 points and 26. And so they're saying if these people were racist, that he wouldn't have won. And it's like, if I was the interviewer, I would have asked him, so how many people are in the state of California? How many congressional districts are in the state of California? Right? Is California a majority white state? Because, if you answer those questions, then you should understand that your argument is specious, let alone stupid, about Kamala Harris, because you got elected in a district of 750,000 people. She got elected in the largest state in the nation to be their U.S. senator. So just on GP, she's gotten more votes in one election than you probably gotten in your whole life. And not only that, she was the attorney general for the state of California. So again, she has gotten more votes in one election than you've gotten your whole life. And she got to be the vice president of the United States. So she was on a presidential ticket, which definitely got more votes than you'll ever get in your lifetime. Right? Now, I expect a white person like a Scott Jennings or Kevin Leary or whatever other, Brian Todd or Charlie Kirk or any other despicable white man you can think of, right? But for a black man to say it, it's just stupid, right? It's invidious, right? For a man to say that. And it really bothers me because it's like, you don't have to agree on policy positions. I think Thomas Sowell is one of the smartest men ever to live, and we don't agree on stuff. And it took him a minute to get to his point of view, because at one point in time, you understand his background, you understand mine. We were pretty similar in thought, and we're not that far apart. But considering his life experiences compared to mine, I understand why he has taken a different route. But I would never hear Thomas Sowell say anything negative about me as a black man or question my credibility or my credentials, nor will I do the same to him. We just disagree on stuff, right? But for a black man to belittle another black person, let alone a black woman, and yeah, y'all can throw in she's also Southeast Asian, all that, whatever. She's a black woman. She's a woman of color. And for you to use the white folks' arguments about her is terrible, right? Just man up and just say you disagree with her political viewpoints and keep it moving. But to use their talking points, that's not manning up at all. And it's just painful for me to hear that, right? And then the other day, so Donald Trump shows up at the Federal Reserve, right? Now, he's trying to make a show plus other things, and I'll get into that in a second, I promise, because I know I say I'm going to jump on something and then I don't get back to it, but I'm going to definitely get back. And so he shows up at the Federal Reserve, and he's got Chairman Powell with him, and he's got Tim Scott, Senator from South Carolina, with him, right? And so Trump was there to try to embarrass Powell in front of the press about how much it's costing to renovate the Fed. Although if you read other stories, Trump tried to interject in how the Fed was being renovated and wanted to put in like marble and other things, which would have ran up the cost even more, but he wanted to embarrass the chairman. And so when he throws out how much is costing, the chair looks at him and says, yeah, I don't think that's right. I haven't heard that. So Trump pulls out this sheet of paper and he gives it to the chairman, and the chairman looks at the sheet of paper and he says, oh, you're factoring in something that's already done. And of course, Trump can never be wrong. And he's like, oh, no, that's what it says on the paper. He said, yeah, the building you're talking about that raises the cost up another $400 million is been completed 5 years ago. So this was done before you were even president. Or I take that back. It was done in your first administration. Right. Now, Powell didn't say that. I'm saying it. If it was done 5 years ago, then that was when Trump was in his last year as president. So it was during his administration that this first phase of his project happened. And so now Trump is trying to complain, saying, oh, well, it costs more than what you're saying on here. He said, no, this is running on schedule because this was the biggest phase. And to tie in with the Wesley Hunt thing, that was the congressman from Texas I was referring to. Here comes Tim Scott saying, oh, yeah. I saw it says 3.1. Actually, it says 3.2. Look, brother, and we've had our conversations. I know I'm just a small fish in the pond. You don't feel you have to respond to it. That's great. You don't ever have to talk to me in life, right? You've embarrassed yourself enough trying to be president, trying to marry somebody. Doesn't even matter if she was a white woman. You just got married thinking that you were going to be president or at least vice president, right? And here you are, Trump's trying to make a fool of this man, and you're down with that. Oh, yeah, you're going to be the peanut gallery. Oh, yeah. Stop doing that, right? Stop doing that. I get it. Ambition is blinding. Power is enticing. I get it. And you want to do anything you can to maintain what you got or move up somewhere. Maybe you'll get a cabinet position. Maybe you won't. I don't know. Yeah, and maybe you might get to be president or vice president. I don't know. But I just suggest that y'all man up about it, right? I'm trying to get away, I've gotten away from the name calling part of it. But it's still it's still a problem. It's still a problem for me to see people not be men and women in this process, that they're petulant children. That's a problem with me. If Donald Trump wants to be a petulant child, a spoiled brat, then let him do that. He's 80 some years old. Let him have that, right? He ain't going to change. But you young folks, if you really want to gain respect, if you really want to get more than half of the population on your side, be men and women about it. And please stop tearing down people that look like us, right? I don't have a problem with groups that push for reparations. What I do have a problem with is that you think that you have to destroy other black people. I don't care if they're from Ghana. I don't care if they're from Cameroon. I don't care if they're from the Caribbean. I don't care if they're from Detroit, Atlanta, Chicago, Miami, Jackson, right? You don't have to tear down other black people to make your argument. Make your argument. The chips will fall where they may. But nobody's going to take the argument serious if part of your strategy is to destroy other black people. You'll never get that, but that's my advice, right? And some of y'all have been in the political game. Some of y'all have been in the entertainment business. You know that solidarity gets us over. Talent will go you so far. Solidarity gets you over the hump. That's been the strength of black folks, right? And not everybody's going to get on board, but if you get the majority of them, if you have the will of the majority of the people behind you, if you have the goodwill of Black people behind you fighting for Black issues, you're going to win. I know people are tired of singing "We Shall Overcome," but unfortunately, the song is still relevant. You may not want to sing it anymore, but we still have to overcome. We still have battles to fight. If that was the case, then we wouldn't have a situation like Breonna Taylor. We wouldn't have a situation like Sandra Bland. We wouldn't have a situation like George Floyd or Philando Castile or just throw out a name. We wouldn't keep having these situations if we have totally overcome, right? So that's my personal gripe. If you want to be a fool, that's on you. If you want to be a man and a woman and be an adult in the political game, then be one. You don't have to agree with me. You don't have to agree with Vice President Harris. You don't have to agree with President Obama. You don't have to agree with any Democrat of color. But respect the journey that got us to where we are. Respect the fact that all of us have done something worthy of having our opinions and our voices to be heard. If we're not trying to minimize your qualifications, don't minimize ours, right? I think it's incredible that two Black men that were in the same class at West Point are now both members of Congress. Doesn't matter that they're both Republicans. It is what it is. It's an amazing achievement. And to be honest, 3 people in the class, that same class, are now members of Congress. It's just that the Democrat is a white guy. But 3 members of one class in West Point are now serving in the United States Congress. That's an achievement. And there's a bond between them that'll never be broken, right? That's something to be celebrated. But if I turned around and said, well, the 2 Black guys, they were DEI, the white guy was qualified, but y'all 2 just got in, and y'all had to sleep in the Robert E. Lee barracks, you'd be upset. So why would you think that Black folks wouldn't be upset if you disqualified another Black person, right? You ain't got to agree with our politics, but stop disparaging the character of other Black people, right? You know what I'm saying? I just, that's just aggravating. But now let me get back to the president, because that whole thing with Powell, and now we're reliving the greatest hits and saying that Obama was treasonous and Joe Biden did this and the dog did that and the cat did this. And, all these other things that are happening right now. You're trying to make a deal with a convicted sex offender just so you will get your name cleared, right? This is not reality TV, ladies and gentlemen. This is really happening. This is real life. And, we have a president that is allergic to accountability. It's not that he doesn't know what it is. He's allergic to it. He will never be accountable for anything he's done, good or bad. Because if he thinks something is good and then a few years later it bites him in the butt, he's going to deny being involved with it, right? He's picked cabinet members who have already destroyed his complaint before he even makes the complaint. Can we say Marco Rubio, right? And then you tell one reporter, well, I think Tulsi Gabbard is wrong, and she's the director of national intelligence. She's trying to tell you that the action you're getting ready to take is not based on any evidence we have found. You say she is wrong, but she's right when she says that Barack Obama committed treason. And when that same reporter that you told was Tulsi Gabbard was wrong, you turn around and when she says, well, don't you think that she's just trying to curry favor with you, trying to show that she's on the team by doing this little stunt for you, right? And folks want to get upset. It's called accountability, Mr. President. Mr. President, it's when you when you took that position, and this is the second time you've had it, at some point you need to understand that Harry S. Truman's rule applied before he was president, and it applies now. The buck stops with you. And whatever happened in your life prior to being president is all about you. If you were friends with Jeffrey Epstein, you were friends with him. Regardless of what he did or what he's accused of doing, he's dead. So he's not going to be accountable anymore. Not on this realm anyway. But you're still with us. And you have to be responsible for your actions. If you knew, then you knew. And you can do like any other criminal and try to deny that you did it. That's fine. Or you can be accountable. If you weren't part of it, then you weren't part of it. If you are part of it, you need to let us know what's going on. And if you weren't part of it, but you do things that make you think that you were, like, hey, let me know, right? Speaking about accountability, so one of the jokes I tell is I have a friend who was a member of the FBI. And when I was an elected official, I would joke with her and tell her, hey, look, if they ever start looking into me, you need to let me know. And she was like, I can't do that. I said, you better let me know. That was a joke because she can't. She might be the agent assigned to the case. She can't let me know. But we knew it was a joke, right? President Trump doesn't think that's a joke. He thinks that he's supposed to know if he's under investigation or if his name comes up in a criminal investigation. You're not supposed to know that. And the attorney general is definitely not supposed to be the one to tell you. You don't put that on the attorney general because the attorney general is only appointed by you. They're not your lawyers. If you want your lawyers to work for you, then just let them build their own little firm in Washington. Since you wanted to neuter a law firm in Washington, D.C., you should have just told them, make all these people partners in the firm. So that way, someone went down with you, they'd do that. And maybe down the line when all these folks are out of office, maybe that is part of the deal. I don't know. Other than getting the money and doing pro bono cases and whatever, right? But all these different things you're throwing out here, and you're following Steve Bannon's playbook to the T, just flood the zone with stuff. And you got poor folks on MSNBC and CNN and Fox and all having debates about all your distractions when the focus should be about your involvement with a human trafficker. Either you were involved with it or you were not. All this other crazy stuff you're doing to try to deflect from that, people see it for what it is. Now, the folks that are going to defend you no matter what, they're going to do their part. They're going to be the cheerleaders. They're going to recite the stupid stuff in front of intelligent people. But, if it wasn't for ratings, Scott Jennings would not be on CNN, right? He'd be working at Fox because that's where that mindset is. If you want to be cheerleaders for the president, totally biased, then you need to work for a network that's like that. CNN, they want to get a share of the Fox group. So they allow people like Scott Jennings and Kevin Leary, which again, Kevin Leary is not even a citizen of the United States. So why is he even in the discussion, right? The only time he should be on is about either business news or immigration, since I guess he's on a visa. I don't know. He's not an American citizen. He's Canadian and he has a citizenship with UAE, Dubai, right? He's not a citizen of the United States, but we give him, he doesn't even vote. And we give him cachet to have discussions about American politics, like almost every night. Doesn't make any sense. But it's for entertainment. It's for ratings. It's not for intelligent discussion. There are a number of people, Democrat and Republican, that you could put on TV shows and have political discussions that are intelligent people, civil people, but TV news is not for news anymore. It's for entertainment. It's no different than watching Survivor, if that's still on, or Dancing with the Stars, or whatever. When I want to watch news that I like, I watch MSNBC. If I want to get the whole story, then it's like BBC and Reuters or whoever, read AP, whatever, Snopes, right? But not, if I'm trying to build my arguments, then I'm going to listen to the folks at MSNBC because they're on my side, right? And I make no secret about my allegiance and my history with the Democratic Party. It is what it is, right? And folks, black folks and white folks can criticize me for that. That's fine. That's my life. I'm just like the athlete that plays for one team their whole career. Been a Democrat my whole political career. So that's my mindset, right? But when Democrats do something stupid, like Bob Menendez or Bill Clinton, we call them out on it. Part of my legacy in politics was that I was not afraid to call out the Democratic governor I had the privilege of serving under for 4 years, or other Democratic elected officials, probably to my detriment, because in-house fighting is worse than street fighting. But the difference between me and some of these folks that are now in positions, elected positions, is that focus is not about currying favor with folks that are trying to destroy me. It's about defending the people that need my help, right? There are people in Texas, there are people in South Carolina that need your full attention, gentlemen, not the guy in the White House. He could care less about what you do, how you do it, how you say it. There's people in Florida, people in Indiana, Kansas, South Dakota that really need help. They need to make sure that they can live their lives. People in Georgia, people in Mississippi, there's people in Illinois, there's people that need help. And worrying about who's in what file and, all these different things, which, by the way, that was a pretty low thing to do. Speaking about files, I'm glad that Reverend Bernice and Martin III publicly chastised the president for what he did in releasing their dad's files. Part of the distraction, flood the zone strategy, right? But people are more concerned about, when I get up this morning, is it going to be safe for me to drop my kids off at school? Is there a school for my child to go to? Are the roads going to be safe? Are the bridges going to be safe for me to cross? Getting to work? Will I even have a job at the end of the day? Will my business close? Will I get laid off? If I get sick, will I be able to afford the health care that I need? When I go to the store to try to feed my family, will I be able to get everything I need to feed them? Will there be a park for my kids to play in? Do I have to worry about crime in my neighborhood? These are what people care about every day. Can I keep my house? Are the laws there to protect me or to hinder me? Can I afford increases in my tax rates? Or will I have to sell this house that my family's been in for 40 years just because they want to create a walkway nearby? These are real conversations. These are real concerns that people are having. If my car breaks down, will there be public transportation for me to get to work? Can I afford an Uber or a Lyft? Right? These are real questions that people deal with every day. If I get a job, can I afford childcare? If I can't get any government assistance, then where can I go? These are the questions that people need answers to, not who's on what file. If you know you did a crime, the best advice is to not say anything about it, not create more mess, not try to say, well, if I'm a criminal, everybody's a criminal. That's not how that works. if you really want to distract the American people from any bad stuff you may have done in your life, then do something good. Instead of making tax cuts for rich people that you want to hang around with permanent, make the tax cut on tips and overtime permanent, right? If that's what you want to do. Raise the minimum wage and not just the $15. That ship sailed 5-6 years ago. You got to raise it to 20 now. You know, when the bailouts were happening, you said, Mr. President, that, well, businesses should fail. But if a business can't afford to pay somebody $20, you want to accommodate that, right? I just think we've got our priorities mixed up. I think we're all about entertaining and being destructive instead of being serious and being productive. And that's, and we've got to get back into that direction. We got to get serious. We want to be entertained. We've got sports. We've got music. We've got movies. All right? Got art galleries. We have poetry readings. That's entertaining. People that are supposed to be making decisions about how our society operates, that's not about entertainment. That's serious business. And instead of trying to destroy your opponent, just beat them. Just beat them fair and square. You don't have to redraw lines and alter voting machines and algorithms and all that. Just go out to people and say, hey, I'm the best person for this job because. And if people say yes, then it was meant for you to have it. If people say no, you find another way to contribute. But you don't destroy the system because you didn't get your way. Literally, I got to close this out, but I dealt with this firsthand, like an organization I was in. The chapter would have an election, and then the person who didn't win would go and start a whole new chapter just so they could be in charge of something. That's not how this works. And there was no money involved with that, right? There were no trillions of dollars in play on that. It was just ego. And that was petty. And that's all this is now at a national level. And there are trillions of dollars at play. And you letting madmen make policy. We got to kick 3,000 people out of the country every day. Really? I mean, I haven't done the math, but I don't think that equates to 20 million. That's the number y'all keep throwing out about how many people are undocumented. I don't think you can kick out 20 million people in a year. Maybe, I don't know, that might work out on a daily basis, but you're not going to arrest 3,000 people in a day. Regular police departments in major cities don't meet that threshold every day for real criminal stuff, And then you're cheating because it's like if the people are at the courthouse trying to get their situation straight, right? That's just like arresting somebody in immigration court trying to get their status squared away. It's just like you're in court dealing with a traffic ticket for insurance. You didn't have insurance at the stop, so you go to court. Now, at that point, you're before the judge, right? So the officer can't turn around and give you another ticket for not having insurance while you're in court, right? They can't arrest you, or in some state, in Georgia, it's an arrest when you write a ticket, but they can't write you another ticket because you're in court dealing with the issue. So why is ICE allowed to go in and arrest people that's in immigration court? Because you're trying to meet a quota. That's insanity. That's the sign of a madman. And you're trying to cater to madmen and mad women. It's time for us to get serious and productive about our politics. And if black folks are going to be the conscience of it, and the last thing we need to do is to tear each other down just because we're on opposite sides. All right, that's all I got. Thank y'all for listening. Until next time.
NBG Podcast Network.